We are not formally educated in any of the topics we will be discussing in this podcast. Neither are we claiming to be experts by any means. These are our opinions, and none of it is intended to be taken factually. I would also like to state that this podcast contains strong language and humor that might offend. Listener discretion is advised. In this podcast, we dive into the hidden mysteries of everyday life, those strange, quirky, and sometimes baffling questions that most people don't even think to ask. From the unexplained phenomenon right under your nose to the odd facts buried in the back of your mind, we're here to explore the curious corners of the world around us. Whether it's religion, spirituality, or science, they all have something to say about who we are, where we came from, and the powers of the universe. The truth has to be somewhere in between. Welcome to the Riddles of Reality.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first episode of the Riddles of Reality podcast. I'm Sarah. Jaden's here. One of the things that Jaden and I have talked about a lot is the process in which we're going to start this podcast. Let's start with the Big Bang. In all honesty, buddy, I was thinking about this last night. Just at the podcast in general, I honestly believe that nothing is actually true. I don't think we know what we think we know at all.
About existence?
About anything. I think we're wrong about everything. You know how the saying goes, there's two sides to every story and the truth is only in between?
Yes.
I don't think that's the case here.
I personally think with the Big Bang, because I agree with you, I don't think that there is a way for us to now, show me the proof of how you know. Okay. The Big Bang was even a thing.
Let's start it this way. You went to public school. I went to private school. What did they teach you in public school? Was it all Big Bang and evolution?
They did teach us about evolution. They were monkeys, but they also kind of told us fish. But at the same time, they left it open to a biblical standpoint as well. Just because the school is so big, you can't really be it's only evolutionary based.
Right.
So they kind of taught us from all angles. They taught us biblical. They didn't deep dive into biblical, though. I feel like that was foreign territory that they couldn't really cross into.
Yeah.
They briefed biblical, and then most of it was evolutionary based. And Lucy, the monkey.
Yeah.
Spent a long time learning about Lucy. They did mention fish, too, the possibility of us coming from a fish.
Right.
But the reason why I feel like they did that is I feel like people questioned, well, what came before the monkey? It's like the chicken or the egg. What came first? I feel like people were like, well, what came before the monkey?
Here's the thing that I don't understand about evolution. There's this big discussion that dinosaurs evolved into the animals that we know today. So you're going to tell me that a T-Rex devolved into a chicken. That doesn't make sense to me. So from the private Christian school perspective, we were taught, the story of creation, God made the world in 7 days, etc. But then when we got into high school, the conversation started to be about, okay, from a science perspective, this is what science is saying that we evolved. From, Christianity perspective, this is where it came from. So there's this idea that exists that God created evolution and everything went from there, but I'm still not buying into that. The thing that I don't understand is that if you talk to scientists and you talk about the Big Bang, everything happened in a 1 in trillion billion chance. And it just so happened to occur in a perfect format. The probability of everything working out and being perfect and continuing to work that way doesn't make sense.
Here's something crazy that I think about. Just a small disclosure, Sarah grew up religious. I did not.
And I'm gay.
And she's gay. She's a Jesus-loving gay. The thing with Jesus or God creating everything, if the Big Bang happened and people picture Jesus as a white man with long hair, that is so far-fetched to me. Almost selfish in a way for us to assume that if there was this magical being...
Mm-hmm.
Why is it a person? I don't think it is likely to be a person. I find that selfish because we're really not that great. The human species, we're actually horrible. If you look at everything that we've done, we're actually horrible. We're killing off all these species on the earth and we're happy about it. So for us to picture this being that has created everything and given us the trees and the grass and our crops being a person, taking on the shape of a white male is
Right.
so ironic to me.
Right.
And I think that if there was a Big Bang, and once again, I was not raised religious, so this isn't meant to offend. I'm just not fully educated on the matter. If everything started with a Big Bang, supposedly, and we're saying that this magic man in the sky gave us the dinosaurs and everything, or created everything. Where did he come from? Where are we claiming that he came from?
From the Christianity perspective, God already existed. He always existed. There was never a time without God. And I think with the human mind and our concept of time, we can't grasp things. I think that's why we're wrong about 90% of what we think we know, because we have a very strong inability to grasp everything. But then you look at everything from the Big Bang perspective, right? And it's saying, well, there were these molecules and bacterium and all this stuff floating around and everything just happened well, then where the hell did the bacteria and shit come from? We don't know. You can't create nothing from nothing. So I don't know. That's my take on it. What do you think happened?
With the Big Bang?
Do you even believe that theory?
I definitely believe there was some kind of explosion, whether it was a different universe that exploded or imploded. Regardless, there was definitely something there. There's no way to tell what exactly was there unless it was black matter, which seems to be the only logical explanation, unless there was a pre-existing universe that we would have no recollection of whatsoever that somehow imploded on itself. Like,
Right.
a black hole can implode. Everything can implode. A planet can implode. The universe as a whole could have imploded for whatever reason and gave us the universe that we know now, or at least gave us a replica of what was already there.
Yeah.
Now we're here just trying to figure out what it was, but we have, we know millions years worth of history of our planet.
Yeah.
So we know that the Earth has been around for billions of years.
Right.
How can we put an age on the universe when the furthest we can get a person is to the moon, a little bit beyond?
Right.
I think it's crazy for us to be like, no, we know the beginning of the universe. The chance of the Big Bang being like our next door neighbor, like it happened one planet over.
Yeah.
We can study that.
Yeah.
That's like crazy to me because you can't contain black matter, like what's in the universe. It's not like you go up there, put it in a jar, close it, and bring it back down. It's like there's just nothing there
Right.
to study. So I think that there definitely was some kind of explosion, but of something that was already pre-existing.
So that's where all the additional matter came from that formed what we know.
Well, there was
today.
probably previous life. We would never know.
My personal take. I'm a spiritual person. I don't necessarily say religious because I think, again, there's a lot of things that we don't know, a lot of things that we can't wrap our heads around and comprehend. But one of the things that makes me sure that the world was created by a larger intelligent being is just the way that everything perfectly works, from the way that our solar system works to how the grass grows here, right? Things just are too perfect to just magically happen by chance, right? But I never had the thought that there was already an existing planet or existing something that imploded upon itself and created technically a chemical reaction. One of the theories I've heard is that God's concept of time is different from our concept of time. A day to us, which is 24 hours, doesn't necessarily match a day to him. A day in spiritual time could be 1,000,000 years. So one of the arguments was, okay, God created animals, and then 1,000,000 years later, which is, one day his time, here comes humanity. And then within that 1,000,000 years time, it's saying, okay, the dinosaurs were roaming the earth, things started happening. God forbid a meteor hit the earth, which that's a whole nother conversation on that, and wiped all the dinos out. And then here all of, humanity shows up at the last second. I think there's just kind of a lot to be desired. But again, I think that on a lot of ways we're never going to fully get the answers, right? I don't think we're ever going to fully know what truly happened or be able to say, yeah, this is exactly what happened, That's just my take on it.
I don't think that the timeline is appropriate because whether or not anyone's view of time, personally, time doesn't exist in my mind.
All right, was time a concept then? Is time actually a real thing? Because if you think about it, time essentially was a human constructed concept, right? We're saying there's 24 hours in a day, 12 months to a year, etc. Does time actually exist?
I don't think it does. Maybe a different form of it, kind of, but not the way that we understand it. Just because you sent astronauts up into space, their concept of time is significantly different than it is down on Earth. They're up there for, and these aren't real numbers, I don't actually know. Say they're up there 2 days their time, they come down a month past here. Like, oh,
That's really how that works?
yeah.
No way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, time's like quicker down here than it is up in space. But the way that we base time is just whenever the sun rises and then sets. Is it really time? It's really just a number that we're using to be like, oh, this much longer until the sun goes down. That's what we're basing it off of. The sun coming up and the sun going down. There is no real time necessarily, but then it's like you don't really age up in space. I could be wrong with that, but I think
either.
I've looked into this a few times. I haven't done it recently with the time thing, but I believe time doesn't pass as quickly up in space as it does down on Earth.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, the feeling's a little warped. And even just from like movies and stuff of like, and not, I'm not saying like not all fictional, but you know, they do a good representation of like showing it, like they disappear into space. They come back, everyone's old. Like that movie, what is it, Mars or Alien? I don't remember who the actor is. He's on Mars. He's trapped on Mars. Comes back, everybody's old. Or everybody was dead. I can't remember.
Wow.
Yeah, like, you know, time's different, I think, on every planet. And I think as we expand our knowledge and we get to other planets and we can study it more, I think it just depends on the atmosphere around you, like what kind of chemicals are floating around you at whatever time. But that like goes into the whole idea of like aging, but I'm gonna steer away from that because that's like a different conversation. But yeah, the thing with time, we can say, you know, the universe was created billions of years ago, but it's like, okay, but what is billions of years? Because if it was billions of years Earth time, what did that mean for space time? If we're gonna go on the basis of quote unquote time.
Yeah. So I looked it up and it says that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. 4.5 billion. Do you think the world is younger or do you think it's older?
Older.
We can deduce and we can assume that the world or the universe has been around for such a long time. I honestly think it's younger.
When you look up the Big Bang, and this is coming from, what website is this so I can reference? amnh.org.
Okay.
American Museum of Natural History. According to them, the Big Bang was the moment 13.8 billion years ago when the universe began as a tiny, dense fireball that exploded. Most astronomers use the Big Bang theory to explain how the universe began, but what caused this explosion in the first place is still a mystery. Which, this is even crazy because I've never heard the fireball
I've never heard
theory.
of that
I've only
either.
heard there was nothing, and then there was an explosion, and then there was us. So if this theory is what we're running with now, is there was a tiny dense fireball, where did that come from? And how do we know that?
If you think about fire has to have something to burn off of. And I know that there are gases and things like that out in space. But again, it still leaves a lot to be desired, right? Because then it's like, okay, where did the gas for the fire to burn come from? How did the fire even freaking lit itself? You know what I mean? I don't know. I think that in a lot of ways, we're never going to truly have the answer to the creation story, whether it's from a scientific or religious standpoint. Did you find something?
This is just kind of funny. So I'm just going into some of these little drop down tabs.
Yeah.
And this one has a question that says, what was God doing before Big Bang? And the answer
hanging
is,
out?
so it should not surprise us that God was planning his kingdom. God did not light the fuse or any sort of Big Bang and hope for the best. He created intentionally with a specific end in mind, and this end was predetermined beforehand. I just like the way that they said planning his kingdom.
That question has come to my mind as well. Like, if God existed well before our existence, what was he doing? Was he just, hanging out? Again, it all comes back to this human concept of time, right? That's why I think we can't wrap our heads around a lot of stuff, right? If we're lucky, as human beings, if we're lucky, we get to live approximately 85 to 90 years old. A lot of people aren't that lucky.
Right.
But so then we're saying, okay, I have 85 to 90 years to make the most out of my life, to have kids, to have a family, or if you choose not to, good for you. Like whatever the case may be, you have 85 to 90 years if you're lucky to make an impact on this earth. And with each passing year, your concept of time becomes clear. Do you remember whenever you were a kid and it felt like a year took forever?
Yes.
Do you know why that is?
Why?
Because as a child, you have a very limited understanding of time. So as you get older, because like if you talk to older folks and you're like, oh, I can't wait for my life to get started, or you start talking about how old you are and you talk to an older person, they're like, oh, it goes faster with every single year. That's actually true because your brain has a better understanding and concept of time. That's why when you're a kid, so when you're in the ages of 1 to 10, it feels like a year is like 15 years. And then as you get older and you become more of an adult, it feels like a year is 6 months, 3 months. It kind of scares me, to be honest, because with every single year of my life, it's going to feel even
Quicker.
shorter. Right.
You think back to 2016, that was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
The freaking plague, or not the plague, coronavirus was 4 years
plague.
ago. That quarantine and everything was 4 years ago.
I'm starting to understand time a little bit more now. I'll be searching for cars because that's what I do in my off time, even though I don't need to buy one. What the hell, right? Gonna go look and
Yeah.
I'll see a car and it'll say 2018. I'm like, oh man, that's new. That's not an old car. And I'm like, wait a minute, that car's 6 years old. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh my gosh, it's 2024 and we're almost done with 2024 by the time this podcast is released.
It's weird too, because if you're scrolling on like some kind of social media platform, and there's people who are like around the same age that we are, and they're saying the same things, like, guys, do you realize that 2014 was 10 years ago? And then there's like literal kids in the chat that are like, I was born in 2014. And you're like, there's no way, you're like 2.
Doesn't
like,
it make you want to
how
throw
are
up?
you 10 right now?
Doesn't it make you want to throw up?
Like, you've been alive for a decade?
Yeah. So every time I see the younger cousins in my family or my cousins' kids, I always imagine them as they were when they were 3 to 5 years
Right.
old. And then I see them and they're like, oh yeah, I just finished my first year of college. And I'm just like, what the fuck? What do you mean?
Yeah.
What happened to the past 10, 15 years? So yeah, it makes me want to puke a little bit.
Right? And I know that you can relate too with Taylor. I don't know if you remember Taylor when you first started coming around. I don't think you saw her much, but like she was probably pushing 5 foot.
Yeah.
And now the girl's like 5'11".
No, you know what is driving me nuts? So the first time I met Brandon, he was this
my
little
gosh.
chubby kid. Brandon's one of Jaden's cousins, but he was this little chubby kid with like hair down to his butt. You know what I mean? I remember watching him like tackle Taylor in the pool, right? They're wrestling
Yeah.
and stuff. And then the next thing I know, I turn around and this kid is like over 6 foot tall. He got a haircut. You know what I mean? He's working a job.
He's slim. He's
Yeah.
like fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, like that's it. And that was, what was that, 5 years, 4 years? He just
Yeah.
morphed into a completely different person. not as wild, a little bit more quiet and reserved and, doing his own thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, like this kid went from tackling his girl cousin into the pool
Right?
to, he's 6 foot tall.
Like a man. Every
Yeah, he's
time
a
I
man.
see him, I'm like, you're stuck at age 2 in my
Yep.
brain. Like you never exceeded age
Yeah.
2.
Do you think that, and you and I, neither of us have kids or nieces or nephews or anything yet, but do you think that that's how your parents kind of see you? They're stuck in when they look at you, they're like, shit, I remember you when you were 5. I remember you when you were born.
I think they remember us. I don't think we're like stuck in that age to them just because, if you see them like all the time,
Yeah.
when you're like in constant contact with them, I just feel
Yeah.
like it's different because like you said, you see your cousins, you don't see your cousins that often.
Mm-hmm.
And like, my cousins, we see a select few cousins often.
Yeah.
Like Brandon, though, we don't see him that much. So,
Yeah.
years go by and you don't realize it's been years. And then you see him next and he's like this whole, but you haven't seen him for 4+ years.
Yeah.
You haven't talked to him for 4+ years. And then all of a sudden he pops out. I don't think parents see you like that. I mean, I think sometimes when they look at their kids, they're definitely like, I see my little baby when I look at you.
I think they have an oh shit moment.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Like they're just roaming the earth.
Right. So they're
Unsupervised now.
so one moment they have you and then the next moment, they're giving you away at your wedding and they're sitting there and instead of like being crying happiness, I think they're crying. They're saying, oh shit, I've lived 25 years.
Oh my
I don't know
God.
what the hell just happened. Hopefully I have another 25 left.
I think at situations like a wedding, when they have to look at you in a light of like, oh my God, you were that baby I was rocking to sleep 2 hours ago. What
Yeah.
just happened? Then they reflect a little bit and they're like, that went fast. But on a regular day-to-day basis, when you're just like stopping by, you're
Just
like, oh,
like
hey,
this.
Mom, I don't think they're like, you look different. If you see them often, if you see them and talk to them, I don't think they're like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah. But you know what? That explains why, like, when you come around family that you haven't seen in a long time, like, you go to a big family reunion, haven't
Yeah.
seen anybody since you were 3. Little auntie comes up to you and she's all frail and weak and I remember you when you were 3. Do you remember me? And you're like, hell
yeah,
no.
because the last time they saw you, you were 3.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's more clear on like the extended family's end. But you know what though? I think to that point, they're stuck seeing you as that smaller person. Because like when you think about,
Well, I know, I agree, because I think that's a weird concept for humans to grasp of like the last time they saw you, you were 3 and
Yeah.
your parents,
yeah,
were doing everything for you and
Yeah.
now you're like this grown thing making your own decisions.
well, I think it's all linked to core memory, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like maybe you have an interaction with, auntie 20 some years ago and you're 3 years old, you're not going to remember shit, but your auntie's going to remember that because she's an adult now and maybe she really enjoyed spending time with you when you were 3, so that's a core memory. So you're locked in her memory for the next 20, 30 years as
Yeah.
being that small 3-year-old. Again, this all ends up going back to the concept of time.
Right. The concept of time, I would love to see what it is like on other planets. Just because we know the difference between outer space time and Earth time.
Yeah.
There is a difference there. We know that. We have proof that that is, whether or not it's really time. This all goes back to whether or not you actually believe in time. I think
Yeah.
it's a human generated thing, but at the same time, if you're floating up in outer space for how long, you come back down, everyone has gray hair and is kind of decrepit. It's
Yeah.
like there's something there.
Yeah.
It's time, and I do believe in the possibility of if you move fast enough in space that you can go back in time and you can rewind time.
Before we get to that point, that's a whole nother, you're digging us deep, but do you think then that if you go to space, right? You as a human being go to space, do you then have some invincibility? Time works differently in space than on Earth. So by the time you come back down, like say you're up in space for a year, 2 years, you come back down, it's like 10 years have passed. Everybody's great. Everybody's older. Everybody's bodies are starting to change. So then my question is, if we start
saying, like,
launching people into space,
immortality?
maybe not even immortality, but like there's there's like always been kind of like this basis conversation of, can we create the human life to be over 100 years old? Are we going to get to that point? Absolutely, we will. But then it's like, is space part of that? Is it going to be that instead of a human, and we'll base it on human time, instead of a human having 85 to 90 good years on Earth, does that then mean that since time moves differently in space, they have 100 to 200 years if they lived in space? Again, we're basing it off
Yeah,
of human
I think
time.
so. I definitely think so. I mean, I kind of feel like down on Earth, the ideal living condition, I don't think it's Earth by any means. So even just changing the environment a little bit, there's definitely ways that we can get our life expectancy up.
Yeah.
I don't think we can do it down on Earth. I think we've corrupted the place. But in outer space, and I know that sounds weird because you have to bring the air from down here up there, but if you could create air or form it, make it pure, because I think we have too many toxins floating around down here. I think we're slowly killing ourselves just by breathing,
For
you
sure.
know?
Yeah.
Because, and this just goes back from like looking at time periods of, you know, some people, when they interview people who have lived to be 110, 150, you know, the answers that they give are never quite the same. You know, when everyone's like, what's your secret to life? What's
Dr.
the
Pepper.
secret? No, that's usually what it is. Like, I know
Yeah.
there was this one little old woman, and I don't remember how old she was, but she, I think, she exceeded 100. She was 100 and something. They were like, what is your secret? And she said, I eat a square of chocolate a day. Just one square of chocolate a day. And she's like, that's my secret. And she like lived by that. Like, that was her life hack. She seriously was like, if I don't eat this one square of chocolate, I might croak tomorrow. So that's like crazy to me, because it's like, is there science behind something?
Well, I know what you're talking about because I think I saw that video of that lady, that news report of that lady. But I know there was another one. She lived to be 100 and some, and they're like, what's the secret to life? And she's like, I drink a crack open a cold Dr. Pepper every single day. And this lady was like the epitome of health. She wasn't
Yeah.
overweight. She was nice and fit. She, you know, she wasn't like slumped over in a,
Yeah,
in a
like,
wheelchair,
still
like,
going.
the secret to life is a family.
Yeah.
No, she was, oh yeah, I crack open a Dr. Pepper every day. Have a Dr. Pepper. What the fuck?
Right?
Have a
But it
Dr.
like
Pepper.
makes you wonder, like, why is no one investigating this further?
Right. Does it make you want to drink Dr.
Maybe
Pepper?
if you drink a Dr. Pepper every morning and eat a square of chocolate, that might be the life hack. Like, we might make it to 200.
See, this is why I say we overcomplicate shit.
Maybe that's why they're telling us Dr. Pepper's bad for us.
I mean, they say all
Well,
soda's bad.
Yeah, they're saying soda.
I don't
but,
know,
like,
Dr.
maybe
Pepper
we
is
need
different.
that.
Dr. Pepper's like, like I don't mean
What
to
is
get
the
on a
flavor of
Well-
Dr. Pepper?
Well, right, but and I don't mean to get on a tangent, but to be honest with you, like Dr. Pepper makes no sense to me. Like as a soda, like if you drink Pepsi or Coke, you know that's a cola, right? You drink
Yeah.
Sprite or what the hell is it now? Not Sierra Mist, it's Starry.
Yeah.
That's a lemon lime, right? You drink, I don't know, whatever else, but then you
you
crack a
saying
Dr.
it's
Pepper. It's like, who the
different?
fuck came up with this? And you know
But
there
it's
has to be some-
good. But
It is.
Here's the thing. I feel I might be a little biased on this. Sodas will have to be a whole episode in itself. This is just a side note. I'm not a Pepsi drinker or a Coke drinker. Sarah is.
I love Pepsi.
I'm not. My preference is root beer. Like, if you got 4 boxes of soda there, you got a Pepsi, a Coke, a root beer, and a Dr. P. My first choice is root beer. My second is Dr. P.
Yeah.
Third is Pepsi. Fourth is Coke. Absolutely hate Coke. I can tolerate a Pepsi more than I can a Coke. But
Why?
I don't like the feeling that Pepsi leaves on my teeth. It leaves that caramel, gritty feeling all over my teeth, and Coke does it too. But I also just don't like the idea that if you put a bolt in Coke, it eats it. I just don't think we should be drinking battery acid at that
Right.
point.
You know what's funny? So you know how like Coke originally had cocaine in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like what happened to that?
what do you
You
mean?
know what I mean? No, I
People were
understand.
probably ODing.
No, because cocaine was different back then than it is now. But the reason why Coke put cocaine in there was, first of all, to kind of act as like almost like an energy drink, right? But second of all, it was to guarantee, because you're getting people addicted. It's the same thing as cigarettes and nicotine, which is why I'm still smoking a vape to this day. But, you know, it was so that you can continue to buy. But you have to think about it, and I think no one realizes that Coke was the original OG energy drink. Because you're cracked out on cocaine.
My God.
Seriously, though. Seriously.
Well, I just don't think that anyone really did any studies on it. Like, they had lead in their paint.
Yeah, that's true.
They had arsenic. What is arsenic? What's the stuff in insulation? Asbestos. That's
Yes.
it. Asbestos was in everything. What was that thing making people radioactive? Is that mercury? Uranium. I think it's uranium. People were just living with uranium around. Oh my God, because it was like old trinkets. If you find old things at antique shops, like old bowls and stuff,
Yeah.
you should take a radiation tester.
I've seen that. Don't
It's
they
uranium.
Don't they glow green?
They glow, but also if you just get one that's not like the light, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah.
it's just like a detector, you should detect all this stuff that you get at antique shops because there's fucking mercury and uranium in them. I don't think it's mercury. I think it's uranium.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're fucking radioactive. And people are just like eating a bowl of cereal out of it on a daily basis.
Whoops.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And they're still circulating and people still want them because they're like worth money now because it's like a piece of history.
Well, it's funny because I probably should have brought this up at the beginning. Like, you know, not to bring religion back into it, but God was a creator and we're made in his same image if you read like the Bible and stuff, but we have the same characteristics as him because all humans are trying to like make stuff. We
Yeah.
just suck at making it because we continue to like put shit in there that's bad for ourselves. Like think about it. What was that? Like I feel like the most recent thing was water bottles that had BPA in them.
Yeah.
You know, every water bottle now has to be BPA free, you know? And then we talk about what we drink out of. Like Jane and I are drinking coffee right now and they're out of plastic cups. And it's like, what, you know, is
with
the plastic
ink on them. With ink.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's on the outside of the cup. So let's hope it doesn't go
Yeah,
on
but
the
you
inside.
know, like it was definitely put on here by some kind of heat. So it's like you heated up the plastic.
And heat always, if you think about it in any scientific experiment, whenever heat is applied to something, that's where you get a chemical reaction.
No, I know.
So, oh man.
Because it would make me think when I worked at the chocolate factory and we would print things on ink-based onto these plastic bags. I'm like, is this really what we're doing?
Okay, so this is kind of off topic, but it could stay on the same topic. Do you remember, and I don't know if you do because you were born in 2001, when candy came in foil wrap? Like you would buy a Hershey bar and it came in foil wrap, or a Crunch bar and it
Oh.
came in foil. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Nothing's in foil wrap anymore, right? It's all in
I think
plastic.
there's one that still does that, but it's like one of the retro bars.
Right,
or
right,
whatever.
right.
Or they do
Thinking
the
about that.
Wonka bars sometimes.
Hey.
Those are still in aluminum.
So is it that they stopped doing it because it's cheaper to do everything? I mean, plastic's cheap.
I definitely think they do it to save a buck.
Or is it because there was some shit in there?
In aluminum? No, I think aluminum was safer than the plastic.
Isn't it that aluminum's just a safer option, period?
I think so.
All right. Well, we don't know that. Again, everybody, please remember that Jane and I are not scientists
Right.
or specialists in anything. That's going to be in every
People are
single
like
disclaimer.
punching the air right now.
Right?
because
They're like,
these
"These-
people are so stupid.
Right? These stupid gals talking about Dr. Pepper and, you know, foil.
Steering us a little bit back to around the Big Bang. All in all, what I think is that the Big Bang was some sort of chemical reaction. But like thinking about it too, if we go off of the hypothesis that I saw when I Googled it on the American History website or whatever,
Yeah.
about it being a fireball, you know how if two atoms were to touch, it would be like catastrophic? Have you heard that? If two atoms were to touch, it would cause like a nuclear explosion pretty much.
So do you think two atoms touched?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
I don't know how, but that's what makes sense to me. Because if two atoms were to come in contact with each other, because they oppose each other, like you
Yeah.
can't push two atoms together, they won't do it. But if there's one that's a little busted and not fully right in the head and it
Oh, no.
flies a little to the right, maybe the fireball had two atoms touch for whatever reason, whether that was a chemical reaction or what. I think that maybe two atoms collided. And here we are. Fireball exploded. Now, where I think little spheres came from, I don't know. Like the planets. And planets are round, by the way. But
We can both agree on that.
planets are round. Sorry, flat earthers. I don't know where the spheres came from in that mix. You know what I mean? That's like a weird thing to begin with. And why is everything a circle out there?
I don't know.
Well, I guess we don't really know if everything's a circle, but from what we know, everything is a circle.
Yeah.
And everything goes in a circle. Everything is a circle. You don't see orbits going in a triangle or a square. I think we were always a circle. I think it has to do with the gravity, like zero gravity and stuff, just the pressure.
All right, Jaden figured out why we're in circles.
Yeah, it's gravity.
You're right.
Put my name on it.
Have you heard that theory that the sun's going to burn out?
Yeah. You know what else you hear? You know how the sun has an empty spot on it? It has a bald spot.
Yeah.
And they say the sun shoots hot bits of flame. They say that either the sun is going to catch us on fire because it's going to spit out a big sun ray and it's going to melt us. But then they're like, what's going to happen first? Is it going to spit out a big sun ray or is it going to burn out? And they say when it burns out, it's going to implode.
Yeah, but then everything dies. I don't know. I think that a lot of things scientifically are a far reach. You know what I mean? Like when I feel like we have to come up with all these natural disasters. I don't know what the scientists do, but part of me wonders if like the ones that are saying, oh, the sun's going to burn out, blah, blah, blah. Are you just coming up with something? What if it just
Probably.
naturally has holes in it and it fills itself in?
Well, I think people panic a little bit.
It's like,
Well, like I said, everyone tries to find an answer to everything, and that's why I think, for whatever reason, people in power don't think that we can just not know. I'm not talking science. I'm talking about, like, the big heads in charge. Like, not even necessarily, like, the government. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, in school, you learn about all this stuff. We know the Big Bang happened this long ago because of this and that. And it's like, okay, but you don't know that. Everything that we're being taught is like an opinion / hypothesis / and I know they want to say it's backed by science. I don't care what facts you show me. You can't show me evidence, true evidence of the Big Bang from 13.8 billion years ago. How would you show that? How did you come to that conclusion? How did you find out that there was an explosion? But they had some kind of evidence that an explosion happened, whether it was the chemical makeup of the planets or just things floating out in space. You know, they're like, there is evidence that something exploded out here, which I think there's explosions in the universe every day.
right.
We just can't see them. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say that there was a giant explosion and that the Big Bang did happen. I do think that the Big Bang happened. You know what? Here's a crazy thing. Now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, so if we're going on the basis that there was a fireball floating through space and it exploded. I don't think that's far-fetched either, but it's like, where did that come from? So say there's nothing. You know, just a blank slate, black. And there is a ball. I don't know if you guys know what a white hole is, but it's just like a black hole, but it spits things out. Maybe the possibility of two black matter planets, maybe not a planet, but just like a black matter sphere floating around, like a dense bit of black matter floating around. What if two of them collided?
And then that's where the explosion came from.
Yeah, like not even a fireball, like they're saying. What if it was just black matter floating around and for some reason some spots got a little more dense than others
Yeah.
and two of them collided with each other? I could see that causing a massive explosion.
Yeah. See, I'm not super big on astronomy, so I feel like my opinion on this, I feel like I can't really have an opinion because I'm not educated in that enough to really hypothesize on what could and couldn't be.
Well, how do you view it then? What do you think really was the Big Bang, if you think there was a Big Bang? Or do you think it was just the universe has always been around?
I think that, I don't think we're ever going to be able to explain God. I don't think we're ever going to be able to explain the spiritual realm, which Jaden and I are going to talk about much, much later, because that's such a broad conversation. It's going to take up a lot of episodes because her and I have had so many conversations on that. When the Bible talks about creation, I don't think it's 100% valid. I think that in a way, some things were put in human terms because it was written for humans. So I don't think that we can fully grasp the capacity of which things were created. Could it be that God was like, all right, I'm going to take these two atoms, let's make an explosion, and I'm going to kind of create things from that, or this is how things happen? Absolutely, it could have been that. Is it God, speaking and deciding what was made and what in what time, and it only happened in 7 days? Sure. I think there's a lot of different avenues that you can go from a biblical perspective, from a religious perspective. Again, I'm more spiritual than anything else because I recognize that there's a lot of things that I don't know. But the fact that everything works in unison so perfectly to a point where it couldn't happen by chance, that's what doesn't sell me on the Big Bang. We both know you can't create nothing from nothing, right? But that's our human concept. That's our humanity. So that's just kind of like where I'm at with that. That's why I don't go and look into different things about the Big Bang. I recognize that I had to have been created. The world had to have been created by an extremely intelligent and powerful being. And that being is beyond my human concept. I cannot understand that being. So that's kind of like where I stand on those things.
No, that's fair, because then we get like two perspectives, like mine of, I love astronomy. I do research astronomy quite often, honestly. I'm just infatuated by the moon and everything it has to do with. But like I said, I'm not formally educated in any of it. Every bit of knowledge that I have is literally from Google searches or reading books down at the local bookstore or whatever. So not a lot to back up what I do know, but I do look into it a lot. I hypothesize about, just stuff that I've read, just come up with my own idea. So I like that your perspective is like different than mine, because I love hearing like other people's thoughts. I love hearing what other people think about certain situations, because by no means am I saying that what I believe is right. Neither one of us are claiming that what we think is right. That's not the point of this. This is just purely to discuss broader topics, like larger topics, not just your simple day-to-day. Oh, how's the weather today?
I have searched for podcasts where these types of conversations are had, and I hope that there are other people out there that are interested in the things that like we're going to talk about and discuss. Maybe add to the story of why Jaden and I decided to do this. So I'm married to Jaden's sister. Jaden has a boyfriend, and we would all hang out. Jaden and I would get into these very deep, pressing conversations,
and it would come out of nowhere,
right? And
too.
but our significant others, they weren't that pressed by them. They didn't really have as much interest as we did. And Jaden and I have talked about topics from the Big Bang, creation. We've talked about the spiritual realm. You know what I mean? Like I brought up to Jaden, and this is a whole different, I feel like we could take a whole nother hour to have a discussion where I brought up to Jaden, I said, I've been thinking about how humans impact the earth. We deem certain creatures as pests, as infestations, because they damage our homes or they damage our lawns or something like that, when in all reality, we're the invasive species. We have taken over so much of the earth. We've built our own habitats out of them. We've built cities. We redirect waterways, right? We're to a point where we are affecting the climate. Climate change is a whole nother thing, but that feeds into that. We are the ones that are putting pollutants in the air. We are the ones that are polluting the water, that are destroying other creatures' homes. That was one of the things that I brought up to Jaden, and that's how our conversations go. One of us will have a thought, hey, I was thinking about this, and then we just start snowballing into a whole nother conversation. But the people around us aren't as interested in those things as we are. Sure, everybody's going to have a certain opinion, but I don't feel like they have the passion that we do to really grasp and understand and have these deep conversations.
Sarah and myself, like, we would love to hear other people's point of views on every topic that we're going to talk about. Like we said, we love learning more and expanding our knowledge on stuff. Whether you're providing us with facts or just giving us your opinion on the matter, we definitely want to hear what everyone has to say. People with experience and no experience.
Right.
Just thoughts in general, opinions, how you feel about a topic, how you view a topic, whether or not you believe in a topic, whether you've been studying the topic professionally for 25 years. We would definitely love to hear it and be able to expand and educate ourselves a little bit more, because I know some people might take what we're saying as ignorant because we are not educated, but we never claim to be experts. We're not saying any of this is factual. It's not intended to be. It is purely just two sisters having a conversation
Right. With some
about
coffee.
shit that we have absolutely no education or knowledge about whatsoever.
All right. Well, do you have any final thoughts before we end episode 1?
I would say at the end of this, after this whole discussion, I think that my opinion is still the same. And I know I said a couple different things, like maybe it was a fireball, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, but it all still stays. My opinion of there still was an explosion, or there
Right.
was an explosion, still stands. How about you? Is your
No,
perspective
I mean,
changed?
no, I'm curious to see what everybody else's opinion are on these things. And I think that as we move forward, when we go to different topics, people are going to understand your mindset and why you have the opinions that you have, and my mindset as to what I have. You know, I'm a very spiritual person. I've had very unique experiences, and I'm more than willing to share those. I'm kind of justifying why I believe what I believe, but no, I do think that the world was created by an intelligent being. That's why everything works like clockwork. I think there's a lot of things that we don't know. And again, it's either you have one opinion or the other, but it's like we said at the beginning of the podcast, the truth is somewhere in between.
One final thought at the end of this, I want to hear other people's perspective on it. Like, which direction, just based off of this first episode, which direction you guys lean towards more, whether it's the spiritual side with Sarah or if it's just pure hypothesis, conspiracy kind of like on my end. I just think like mine and Sarah's conversations go into like a really cool place, just because I think we were raised differently. We came from different areas of life, and Sarah's 30, I'm 23, so a little bit of like an age difference there too. So like the way she grew up, times were different than they were when, not significantly, but you know, there were changes, like she said with the chocolate bar. Like, I don't know if you know this or not, but something she says and I'm like, how the fuck were you alive when that was around?
Right.
I thought that was like my mom being young. Stuff like that's weird. So I just think the conversations get to a really cool place because she was raised differently than I was. It was a different time too. Right. So perspective plays in everything. So we definitely want to hear which direction everyone's leaning towards more, whether it's based off this first episode. Like, do you think you're going to relate more with Sarah's opinions throughout the podcast, or do you think you'll relate more with my opinions through the podcast?
Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Jaden and I just kind of word vomit our opinions and get off track and talk about things that maybe don't relate to the Big Bang, but it'll give you a good idea as to kind of like how our conversations will go. And I encourage you, if this episode maybe wasn't your favorite and you're like, this wasn't really a topic that I'm interested in, please take the time, scroll through our playlist, take a look and see what other topics of conversation we have, and feel free to take a listen to those, and feedback is always welcomed. But with that, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jaden.
And this is Riddles of Reality.